So I appreciate, I'm going to be brief before you all. First and foremost, join me in giving a virtual round of applause to our Deputy Director, Victoria Kirby York. None of what you saw earlier or what you will experience today would have been possible without her leadership. So give her a shout out in the chat, virtual spirit fingers, snaps, yes, girl, whatever works for you. Second, for those of you who are returning, it is good to see you again virtually. We had a really great time last year in Dallas. Super excited about the shift and the sea change that is possible for us going forward this year. If this is your first time joining us at Black Institute, welcome. This is your home. On behalf of our entire organization, I think it important just to provide some historical context. So for those who don't know, NBJC hosted the first Black Institute at Creating Change in Houston, Texas in 2014. At the time, the title of the institute was From the Civil Rights Movement to the LGBTQ Equality Movement. And the goal was to explore the challenges and successes for those of us living at the intersections of racial justice and LGBTQIA+/SGL equality. Quick footnote, some of you know that I don't use the term gay. I prefer saying gender loving. One, because gay is often a political identifier for white men, and because it invokes people thinking just about sex and the stigma associated with our marginalized identities. SGL centers love, and is a term I prefer. So if anyone had questions about that, that's what that's about. But let's celebrate that 7 years later, we're still having conversations about the need to tell our own stories and really help people understand where Black folks fit in, who happen to be LGBTQ+/SGL, and deeply rooted in Black culture in America. The inspiration for the conversation then was questions like, are Black queer folks, trans folks, non-binary folks able to live outside of survival mode? Dr. Kia Darling Hammond would say, what's required for us to thrive? And ironically, those conversations endure to this very day. And so we believe then, as we do now, that having a day-long institute specifically for political action around the needs of our beautifully diverse community was important. And I don't know if we say fortunately or unfortunately, history has shown us that there's still a need for us to do this work. So we are incredibly honored and humbled with this responsibility. We hope you enjoy the thoughtful programming that Victoria has worked to develop, and look forward to partnering with each of you and the organizations that you are members of and that you lead, so that we can all get free, not only in this year, but in the years that follow. Welcome and have an amazing day and enjoy all that our team has to offer, including the dope grooves of DJ Liquid, who's one of my favorite DJs. Thank you, Victoria. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you, David. And also thank you for that wonderful welcome and laying out of the history of NBJC and the partnership that we've had over many years with Creating Change and the National LGBTQ Task Force. So now I have the honor and privilege of being able to introduce two of our partner organizations who, without their support, this institute, including the plenary you all just came from, would not have been possible. I'm gonna pass the baton over to Nia Martin Robinson of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, who's gonna provide welcome and greetings on behalf of their organization, who has been serving as our lovely fiscal sponsor for this particular institute for a number of years.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Hey, everyone. I am so glad to be here. So excited to be here. Let me be clear. I learned early on when I took on this role as the Director of Black Leadership and Engagement at Planned Parenthood. One, like being a Black queer woman, had already known the contributions, the beauty, the love of NBJC, but also I imagine that many folks also know that when David calls and asks, you answer. And so I'm really excited to be here, 2021 or 2020, the remix, whatever folks decide to call it, is putting us in another set of situations and circumstances. But as much as 2020 last year gave us the business, as Black and brown folks, as queer, trans and gender nonconforming folks, as folks seeking abortion care, seeking health care, and just a lot of our folks who are simply trying to live and thrive with dignity. We know that we experienced so much last year, but with it all, we were hopeful, we were joyful, we were resilient, and we still and continue to have our eye on freedom. I appreciate what David said about like we are trying to get free as Black folks, as queer folks. So it's an honor to be a part of this amazing event. Thank you so much, NBJC, for everything that you do, for what you have done for me. The existence of NBJC makes it possible for me to be who and how I am. And PPFA is honored to sponsor the 8th Annual Black Institute. It brings me so much joy to make sure that I am getting up every day, ensuring that Planned Parenthood Federation of America is centering Black folks and all Black folks in the ways that we need, and that we're showing up, showing out, and investing in Black communities and Black spaces. So I hope that NBJC continues to see us as a friend, a resource, and a partner. And thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you. We definitely love partnering with you all at Planned Parenthood. Reproductive rights, health, and justice is critical to all Black people being able to be free, and particularly in this space, all Black, LGBTQ plus, same gender loving folks. So again, big thanks to you. I'm gonna pass the baton now to Dr. Ravi Perry, the first openly gay person to ever chair the political science department at the historic Howard University, which also happens to be my two-time alma mater. So I'm extremely biased. Dr. Perry, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone here on the East Coast and wherever else you may be around the world. I'm so excited to be here with everyone over the next couple hours as we gather to center ourselves as Black LGBTQ plus same gender loving folks of all kinds, varieties, and all different languages and abilities to center our power. And the Department of Political Science at Howard University is certainly proud to be a partner with this effort, because we know that politics is about power. And ultimately, we need to ensure that we are doing all that we can to ensure that every possible Black LGBTQ plus same gender loving individual who lives in these United States is able to access their power through this current Biden-Harris administration. So we're really excited to support the effort today, and we hope that you bring the best of yourselves to these sessions today as we convene to hear from each of you about what really matters mostly in your lives and that we need to focus on in the next couple of years to prioritize our issues with this current administration. That's how we make change happen. That's what political science is about. And so glad to be here to support this effort.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. So y'all, I have to tell you, I'm a tad bit distracted for good reason. We have more people coming into the Black Institute right now than the room has capacity for. So essentially we are at if this was in person, we would have to tell people you can't come because the fire marshals are gonna have to shut us down. But that's a good thing. That is a good thing. I think people were definitely feeling inspired by the opening plenary. We're so glad to have each and every one of you here. Do want to make the announcement though, that if you leave for some reason, you may or may not, unless you're a presenter, be able to get back in because some of those capacity challenges. So wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that before we move into the next session. So real quick, hold on, because y'all are lovely. And it's just gonna be for a moment because of our interpretation and wanting to make sure we keep our ASL interpreter spotlighted. I just wanna see all of your beautiful faces. So for those of you who feel so, who feel so inclined to do so, turn on your camera, make sure your name is how you would want it presented. Want to be able to take a quick picture as if we were all together as a family today as we kick off this presentation. Just give me 1 second to stop sharing my screen. I also need to turn my camera on. So let's see everybody who feels comfortable to share. And there's so many of you, I'm gonna have to like take several photos to capture all of this magic and beauty. All right, so I'm gonna give a couple count of threes so you all can have different poses and stuff like that. I know others might be trying to get your screenshot in there as well. If you don't feel comfortable, don't turn your video on. You will not be included in the shot. Once I get to the set where there are no live images, we'll stop taking the picture. Then we'll get back. But take in all this blackness, all this beauty.
Yeah, y'all deep in here. Y'all got dressed. Look at this hair.
Right?
No lip color. Y'all was ready on today.
All right, on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. All right, we're gonna do the second set real fast. All right, because it's gonna be different for all of us. All right, y'all ready? 1, 2, next pose. 3. All right, come one more. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Almost done. I think we're reaching the last page of people on camera. Yep, we are good to go. Awesome. I'm gonna go back to little people view to make sure that our ASL interpreter is adequately shown. All right. So if you all haven't already done it, please go ahead and throw your introduction into the chat. We want to know who you are, what identities are important to you in addition to being Black and LGBTQ+ or same gender loving. And we also want to know where you live. What communities shape who you are? That can be your hometown or where you are present. I know for some of you who are college students, where you live now might be different from what home is. So whatever feels best to you in this moment is what you should use. But go ahead and dump that in the chat as I get our next part of the program going. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure you all had the chance to see is our brand new website. Who loves a good website? Whew, I know I do. If you go to nbjc.org, you can learn all there is to know about the work that we do. The website is in beta, so if so please let us know if there is something that you think we should address in there. But please check it out. You can see that there's a little hello, how can we help place for questions that you might have. But we want this to be your home away from home, your place to be able to engage with us, stay up to date with what we've got going on, be able to share resources. If you have that one person in your life who always likes to be like, so can you tell me, I mean, what is it like to be a lesbian? Okay, here's some resources for you, honey. We have a lot of toolkits on Words Matter and on HIV/AIDS and a whole host of other resources to help all of us thrive and to build community and family chosen and born into who are there to help thrive as well. So at this time, we are going to move to the next part of our program, which is highlighting our movement leaders as they share visions for the future. Ash Stevens is going to be our first person up to speak from Transgender Law Center. Actually, give me 1 second. I think I'm moving a little bit early in the program. Give me 1 second. That slide's a little bit out of place. I'm still getting used to working with the Mac. Those of you who have ever moved from PC to Mac or from Android to Apple or the other way around, you know how difficult that can be sometimes. So thank you ahead of time for your grace. I'm about to go into our Owning Your Power Begins With You presentation. Please know that I cannot see your chats. Feel free to chat away. That if you have questions, there will be an opportunity to be able to put your questions, to raise your hand to ask questions. And there will also be some call and response moments, or chat and response moments, call and chat. Anyway, you all know what I mean, that we're gonna work with. So one of the things that we want to be able to introduce today is a chant that was created by a Black queer feminist named Janae, who might be watching right now because they're doing social media on behalf of the conference. The chant became a song, and I just want us to be able to start feeling centered in all of who we are and loving all our Blackness. If you want to dance, if you want to sing along, I welcome you to do that, because we ought to love being Black. If we don't do it, how can we ask somebody else to?
I said I love being Black. I said I love being Black. I said I love being Black. I said I love the color of my skin. It's the skin that I'm in. I love the texture of my hair, and I will rock it everywhere. I said I love being Black. I said I love being Black. I said I love being Black. I said I love the color of my skin. Color of my skin. 'Cause it's the skin that I'm in. Skin that I'm in. I love the texture of my hair. Texture of my hair. And I will rock it everywhere. Rock it everywhere. I said I love being Black. I said I
Love being Black. Y'all sing along.
I said I love
Being Black.
I said I love the color of my skin.
Hey, whatever shade.
It's the skin that I'm in. I love the texture of my hair. Texture of my hair. And I will rock it everywhere. Said I love being Black.
Hey,
I
hey.
said I love being Black. I said I love being Black. I said I love the color of my skin. Color of my skin. It's the skin that I'm in. Skin that I'm in. Texture of my hair. Yeah. I will rock it everywhere.
Yes. All right, y'all. So this is what I meant when I said we have a few call and chat moments baked in. And because the plenary ran over a little bit, but it was dope, it was worth it, it was worth it. We wanted to make sure we got all of the technical stuff worked out. We're not gonna have a chance to do any of it verbally, but would love for you all to throw in the chat, what do you love about being Black? Blackity Black. Black, Black. What do you love about being Black? It can be any part of it. It can be, you know, like the song highlighted, your hair, your skin, the music, whatever it is that Black means to you, knowing that Black means something different for all of us. You know, Black nerd land has its own culture, right? Black anime land, right? Like whatever your Blackness is, that's what we want you to be able to highlight and talk about in the chat. Let's wrap ourselves up in the diversity of our Blackness. While y'all do that, I'm gonna give you all a couple minutes to go ahead and get those pieces in the chat. All right, I'm seeing some good stuff come through. All right, I'm gonna pull up just a couple real fast. Whew. Strength and traditions, the melanin, African roots, our resilience. Y'all, I love that. Black queerdos, what? I'm using that shit, okay. Hey, I love it. Oh my God, I haven't heard that before. Yes, the rhythm of our people, being unapologetically unique in each and every way, spirituality, passion. The thing I love about creativity and ingenuity, and Sophia, you might already peep this, but our logo, which you will see throughout our slide presentations, is the Neon Sopo the wisdom knot. It's an Adinkra symbol that means wisdom, but it also means creativity and ingenuity, to what Sophia lifted up. So at NBJC, we are all about the creativity and the ingenuity. Our heritage and history, so much. Our jokes, our food. Look, my daughter can talk mess better than anybody at 3 years old. It's crazy. I'm like, where is she getting this from? Her other mama. But so somebody will say something to her and she'll say, that's why you ugly. Bye. I'm just like, oh Lord, okay, girl got jokes already. Yes, I'm loving all of this, the diversity, so much humor on 1000. Oh, a lot of people co-signing the humor, the swag, yes. Oh, heritage highlighted. Yeah, there's nothing like the diversity of Black hair. I love it. Thank you all for sharing. Nora, I'm going to try to do better at talking slower. I am so sorry. I am going to be a lot more mindful of it. And all right, let's get back to sharing the screen. I think I'm getting this Zoom to Mac thing a lot better now. There we go. So one of the things that you're gonna learn more about, I'm not gonna share any spoilers. Just pay attention to your news and to @NBJC on the move on Twitter and social media. But what I will say is that, like James Baldwin, also known as Jimmy Baldwin, also known as the godfather of Black queer culture, intelligentsia, let's throw that in there. We've always been here, whether we're talking about in Africa, whether we're talking about here in America or other parts in the diaspora, in the Caribbean, South America, where we got tons of Afro-Latinos. We've always been here, and we've always been setting and blazing trails, breaking glass ceilings, and doing the work to uplift all Black people, and also doing work to free ourselves as queer, trans, gender non-binary, and same gender loving people. So in this moment, I was looking for the GIF from the song that starts with, "Allow me to introduce myself, my name is Hope." Anyway, couldn't find that one. But at this time I'm introducing, and for those of you who don't know me, you are learning just how corny I am. But I try to crack some jokes. From time to time I hit. So I'm introducing to you all the National Black Justice Coalition's 2021 policy agenda. The 3 pillars that are making up our work, we're about to go into in greater detail. Ensuring that all Black lives matter, co-creating a nation where we all can thrive, and repairing and reconciling a nation divided. You can also find this policy agenda on our website, nbjc.org. When you click policy and power and policy, it's the first thing on our drop down. So pillar number 1, ensuring that all Black lives matter. I'm not gonna read all the text that's here on the slide. I know you all can do it. But the thing that we want to ensure is that when legislation is passed, it includes every single part of who we are and doesn't force us to separate or choose one part of our identity over the other, because all of who you are matters. Your Black self matters. Your LGBTQ plus same gender loving self matters. Your a differently abled or disabled self matters. Your immigrant self matters. Your person of faith self matters. All of it matters. And so when legislation is crafted, it too often centers one part of who we are, a couple parts, but not always all the nuances that make us human. And so when we look at these following pieces of legislation, from the Equality Act to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to the Equal Rights Amendment, Internet access and security for all, we are looking for provisions that are going to ensure that no parts of who we are left behind. The Equality Act is a great example of a bill that has taken 50 plus years to go back to be able to modify, which was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Thankfully to one of our ancestors, Polly Murray, who has a film premiering at Sundance on Sunday, super excited about that, who was able to insert sex into the Civil Rights Act of 1964 when it looked like it was gonna die in the US Senate. LGBTQ people of all races were able to get civil rights protections for the first time that covered all of who we are in employment. And now, thanks to the Biden-Harris administration, that understanding of sex, including LGBTQ same gender loving people, is being pushed out through all other parts of existing law and administrative policy. There's still more work to do, which we'll talk about later today, also in other moments that we hope you'll join us for. But it's important that we don't have to spend decades trying to reinsert ourselves back into legislation that should have been there from the beginning. Black LGBTQ people pushed super hard to get the Civil Rights Act across, from Bayard Rustin helping to co-plan the March on Washington and being the person really leading a lot of the organizing effort behind that, to Polly Murray doing some of the behind the scenes work. The reality that all of who they were not protected in the bill that they helped fight for and champion is very disappointing. So we've got some work to do, and the Equality Act is one form to make that happen. Pillar 2, co-creating a nation where we all can thrive. When we talk about thriving, and you'll notice we have an entire department focused on thriving, at NBJC. We think about thriving as our ability to be whole, healthy, happy. That includes being able to have access to good education, not being saddled by gripping debt, being able to have access to healthcare, ensuring that our minds aren't being messed with by our parents, forcing folks to go seek therapy that we know has not only been debunked, but doesn't really work for us. Our third pillar, repairing and reconciling a nation divided, is really focused on reparations. It's about looking at legislation, all legislation, from the framework of making sure that we're addressing historical and present day harms that were inflicted by our own government. So when we talk about the Economic Justice Act, the Next Step Act, the Breathe Act that's been championed by the Movement for Black Lives, comprehensive immigration reform, and the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Commission, we're looking at all of those things from the place of being able to put resources where they're needed, but also resources where they're owed. Because there is a debt that has been owed to Black and Indigenous people in this country for a very long time. And there are a lot of different vehicles to be able to get that debt paid. So policy sounds lit, right? It'll sound even more lit when you get the full breakdown. Had to rush it to get us back on time and get us back on track. But I wanted to make sure that you all were able to get a little sneak peek and taste at it. If you go read the document online, you'll have a chance to really dig deeper and to learn more about the different bills and also administrative actions that we're recommending, some that have been implemented already this week. So this slide goes back to what I was just saying regarding the Equality Act. And the only reason I'm focusing on this bill over some of the other bills that are also really important is that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has publicly said that just like last session, the Equality Act is in the top 10 of the most pressing bills to be able to pass through Congress this year. And the truth that I want to share that you don't hear talked about much is that the Equality Act is going to mean more for Black people than it will LGBTQ people broadly. What I mean by that is just like Bayard and Pauli were left out, and all of us who they represent of the Civil Rights Act, Black women, period. And of course, LGBTQ plus same gender loving people have been locked out of public accommodations protections. The language only regarded for race. So if you are a Black woman and discriminated against at a hotel, and it's because you are a Black woman, the hotel owner can legally have an argument that says, well, not because she was Black, it's because she was a woman. And because there aren't protections around sex, people can get away with that. So there's a lot around Black women that folks aren't even talking about when it comes to this bill. That's really critical. There's also going to be an expansion of the definition of public accommodations to include ride sharing apps like Uber and Lyft, retail. How many of y'all been followed in a store? I know I have. How many of you have had to sit through a ride or get out of a ride early of an Uber or Lyft because the driver has said or done something that has made you feel unsafe or was a direct act of discrimination against you? This would expand the definition so that not only would it include Black women and LGBTQ folks, but so that it would also ensure that public accommodations is brought up to date with what it means currently. It also, and this is the biggie for the moment we're in right now, which is the inclusion of publicly funded programs in the discrimination protections provisions for the Civil Rights Act. Publicly funded programs is a whole lot, right? From education, but also the criminal justice system, prisons, jails, probation officers, any agency or office that receives federally funded or taxpayer funded dollars would have to be held to the same standards around discrimination as so many other folks who are outlined in the original bill. I often like to make the argument also that the addition of gender expression in the bill is also good for those of us who rock Black hair that doesn't necessarily fit the white standard of beauty, right? Because our gender expression plays out across race and across our sex, sex assigned at birth, gender, etc. And so the language of the bill could also provide some protection for our community, obviously, particularly for transgender and non-binary folks, gender non-conforming folks, but also, in my opinion, for all Black folks. The other truth is that it ain't gonna be easy. So just because Speaker Pelosi said all it does is take 60 votes in the, just because Speaker Pelosi says that it's a top 10 bill doesn't make it easy in the Senate. We still have to get 60 votes in the US Senate. And right now we have 50-ish, depending on what conservative Democrats in the Senate, one in particular I'm thinking of, does, and depending on how many moderate Republicans folks are able to get on the bill or all of the bills that we just talked about as well. I know we can do it. I know we will do it, but it's gonna be on us to determine how long it takes. Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, said in a publication a few years ago after Trump was elected that we can be cynical or we can choose to collaborate. The choice is ours. And I do believe that we're at a moment that, yes, there's some work we have to do together in private space, which is why the Black Institute is a safe space, race-based place, as is all the other institutes happening today. But we also have to do work across the movement, which is why creating change itself is a space where folks are able to do work across lines of racial difference. I'm about to close us up from this segment shortly, so you can hear from movement leaders from all across the country and ask questions as well. But I want you all to remember that who you are is the true power. And a lot of what we're going to be doing today, talking about owning your power, is about allowing each of us to dig deep into the very fiber that makes us who we are. We know that, just as young Pueblo said, true power is living the realization that you are your own healer, hero, and leader, and that standing in your own true path and walking your own true path is a part of where true power comes from. I lift that up because too often, myself at times included, we get discouraged by what's happening around us. And sometimes it feels like there's not much we can do to create change. But getting real clear about who we are, what we stand for, what we're fighting for, and what our skills and interests are, allow us to build a union with other like-minded folks that can really change the world and change the game for our community for years to come. We saw it in the last 2 election cycles. I hope to see it in the next election cycle. We're gonna have some sacred space later today, but we are going to be asking you to dive deep into your power, to own your power, and to own your story, to own who you are as a resource to being able to make change happen. When I meet with lawmakers, whether it was when I worked as an outreach director for a member of Congress, or in the various policy roles I've had in the time since, far too many elected officials have gotten away with saying, particularly conservatives, well, I don't know a transgender person. Well, I don't know what non-binary means. I don't really think there are any LGBTQ people in my family. We know it's a lie. We know people don't feel safe around them, right? So they're not being invited in, which is the term that we use at NBJC. But I do encourage you, in spaces where you do feel comfortable, including this space that we're building together collectively today, we hope that you will choose to invite us in and invite others in to hear the truth of who you are. And in hearing the truth of who you are, be able to create change around public policy, but also in your community. Your story is your most valuable asset. Never forget that. Shared experience always matters. So your story is always an opportunity to be able to get at what are the commonalities that you have with people, even people who are very different from you. It's also a way to figure out shared and individual self-interest when it comes to power players who need to be leveraged a little bit to do the right thing. We're gonna have opportunities over the years to be able to continue to engage you all as parts of the NBJC family now. Y'all are part of this institute, so you're part of the family, whether you like it or not, you NBJC fam. And we want you to be able to engage with us, to learn from us, and for us to learn from you as we continue to shape and build our movement for the better and for the future. So, Owning Your Power 101. We're not gonna have a chance to dig into this very much today, but what I do wanna share with you from what you see up here is to never forget why you're fighting the fight that you have. Always remember to bring your crew with you. It's always better to not be alone, but if you have to be alone, do what you gotta do. Think about what part you wanna play. This list is just a list of a few skill areas that you can dig deeper into that are needed in every movement. All types of people are needed. The diversity of Blackness includes the diversity of tactics needed to make change. Find the thing that gives you the most joy or you have the best skills at, and hopefully that overlaps. Sometimes it doesn't. And dedicate yourself to a cause. It doesn't have to be the Equality Act. It can be any of the bills we listed or other bills that we haven't gotten to yet. But think about how you want to own your power. All right, so I'm a little bit over time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick because I did see a couple things come up in the chat. And I also want to give folks who are in our next segment a moment to make sure they're all put together. I see a question about the slides. I will put all the slides, even the ones I didn't get a chance to go into in more detail, in Feed Loop. And also when we get your email addresses, we'll also be sending out a follow-up email that will also include the different slides and other materials and resources that we talk about. Awesome. So it looks like we're good. Looks like some other folks had the same question. Awesome. So I'm really excited to pass the mic to some folks who have been mentors to me, but also who have been just incredible trailblazers in our movement for many years and decades, and continue to hold the line to make sure that our community is always included and never forgotten, including a really exciting announcement that we're going to lead with. Give me 1 second to pull back up the slides. I'm gonna get this, by the next time you all see me, I'm gonna be a Mac Pro. Y'all gonna be like, it's not the same BKY we saw at Black Institute. She is moving this thing. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know till you realize you don't know it. So at this time, I'm gonna push us into our next segment. And so, you know, after this, we will have another dance break where you will also be able to get a bio break on and also be able to get your party on for those of you who just need to move your body in the space. We'll hear again from DJ Liquid. So know that that is coming. And at this time, I wanna introduce one of the people that I look up to so much for their thoughtfulness, for the way that they approach the work, for their spirit of collaboration, for their heart. And that's Ash Stevens from the Transgender Law Center. Ash is gonna introduce, I don't wanna sidestep the introduction, but something fabulous that just dropped yesterday that all of you should know about, that's gonna have a deep impact in all of our advocacy work, especially in fighting for the lives of our transgender siblings, and for those of you who identify as transgender for your community. So at this time, I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna pass the mic to Ash to talk to us more about this exciting announcement. One second, it looks like there's some trouble unmuting.
I got it now.
There we go.
Cool. Okay, I'll assume y'all can hear me. Thanks so much. Thanks, Victoria, and to folks at the National Black Justice Coalition. And just for time, I just want to say also just a big thank you to everybody else who's speaking and all of you all beautiful Black folks who are a part of the Institute. And thanks for the nice words, Victoria. I'm gonna hold on to those. So yeah, I'm Ash. I use he and they pronouns. I'm the manager of policy and strategy at the Transgender Law Center, which is the largest national trans-led organization in the US, fighting for a world where trans and gender nonconforming people can not only live, but can thrive. And so per the announcement, yesterday, TLC released the Trans Agenda for Liberation, which you all can find here. I'll drop it in the chat. And you can go to our website, transgenderlawcenter.org, and it's on the first page. And so the Trans Agenda for Liberation is a living and loving and ever evolving policy and culture change document towards the world that trans and gender nonconforming communities deserve. And so this document, as I'm sure many of y'all know who have made similar versions, take a while to be made, but I just wanna especially lift up folks in our coalition. I wish I could name them all, but this took years for people to gather, to be in community with one another, to talk about what their needs were, what their priorities were. And so that culminated into 5 pillars that you'll see when you go to the website. And so we led with the first pillar titled Black trans women and Black trans femmes leading and living fiercely, especially because of the moment that we continue to be in of anti-Black, anti-trans, anti-femme violence that's happening both in the US and in other countries. And so with this pillar, we wanted to center the experiences and visions of Black trans women and Black trans femmes, because we know that they hold the experience and solutions to ending violence in our communities and to creating equitable systems of care. And I also want to uplift, my co-writer, especially Michaela, who's at TLC, or Mickey B, for her visionary work and leadership on the agenda. And along with, again, the intergenerational coalition of folks that help with this. So that was the first pillar. The second pillar is called Beloved Home, and it talks about migrant justice and indigenous land and body sovereignty. The third is titled Intergenerational Connection and Lifelong Care, and it envisions a world where trans people are affirmed from the moment of birth throughout our full lifetimes. And the fourth is titled Defining Ourselves, which talks about disability justice and ending the criminalization of people living with HIV. And the final pillar, the fifth pillar, is called Freedom to Thrive, which demands freedom for all sex workers, a world without all cages for all people, and urges us to build community supports that allow our folks to thrive. And I just want to close with sort of 3 quick action steps. And I'm also going to drop another link to an article in Teen Vogue about the agenda as well. But the first is just for you all to read the agenda and to reflect on what it means for you, not only personally, but for the work you all might be a part of, whether that's movement work, you work in schools, you work in offices, you do whatever community work you might be doing. So read and reflect is the first. The second is that you share it with your people, share it with your communities, share it with your friends, and let it live and let it breathe. That's our hope for the agenda. And then the third is that once you go to the website, is that you sign on to it, and that you sign on to demand the new political administration implement the action items that are in there. So it's broken up into problems, solutions, and demands, all 5 pillars. And again, thanks to you, especially Victoria, but also to NBJC, and looking forward to the rest of the Institute.
Thank you, Ash. I'm excited. How many of y'all excited? I see some love this in the chat. I see some excitement on people's faces. It is needed. Very excited. And you'll also note that Andy, who has been an amazing chat monitor, is starting to throw in bio links for folks, so you all can also learn more about each of our speakers apart from what I'm sharing. So big shout out to Andy for that. Awesome. So the next person we've got going is the first person who introduced me to the LGBTQ movement, particularly the Black part of our movement. That was my first introduction when I was a student at Howard. But less about me and more about Earl. Earl is someone with a huge heart who's been doing work in our community since co-founding the Black Pride movement in our country, but also across the world, starting with DC Black Pride. Believe it was 1990, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, in DC, that kicked off the movement right across the street from Howard University, and has continued in states all across the country and world. We know Atlanta Black Pride gets it bumping, and Dallas, New York. Insert your favorite Black Pride in the chat if you want to. But Earl was also for a long time the sole Black LGBTQ member of the Democratic National Committee, and has done a lot to pave the way for more political activism of our community within the Democratic Party. Today, he's here representing the Center for Black Equity, which is a federation of all of the various Black Prides that do work all across the world. Earl, I'm going to turn it over to you. Can't hear you yet. Unmute.
There you go. One day I'm going to learn this Facebook and Zoom stuff and all this social media. Pardon my voice, I'm a little hoarse from running out in and out of the cold, but it's an honor to participate in the this event. I went to my first Creating Change 25 years ago, and it's amazing to see the growth of the Creating Change and the development of so many different diverse voices in our community. People are finally getting their voice, and it's a chorus. It's a beautiful, beautiful symphony of a mixture of gender nonconforming, cisgender individuals, transgender, whatever you call yourself, whatever you identify yourself, there's a space for you in Creating Change. And it's so great to be part of the Black Institute. I believe this is the 8th year, and NBJC has been the steward, a careful steward of developing the Black Institute, the Creating Change, and I'm so proud to be able to participate. I was not at the first Black Pride in 1991. I have to make that clear. I came in 1996. The first Black Pride was developed in DC, across from Howard University at Banneker Field in 1991. And out of the one Pride, we have 50 Prides around the world, 43 in the United States, and 7 abroad. And the important thing to remember about Black Prides is that even though socialization is very important to us, and we need to find and create and maintain and support safe spaces for all members of our community, Black Prides organizations have developed into a voice for their individual communities. And the Center for Black Equity is taking its position of trying to support these movements and support this growth. And one of the things that we're going to be doing in the next year, well, first of all, we're about to release a survey we conducted last fall, and many of you have participated in this survey, and it's almost 2,000 people who look like you and I who filled out the survey, and we have a myriad of information. And the survey is going to be on our website. It's open to anyone. Use it for grants, use it for whatever purposes you need to use it for. It is public domain property. We believe that this is important information that everyone should be able to share. It's not ours alone. And we've had a number of partners, but it's going to give you information about not just mainstream LGBTQ people or middle class or economically, who are doing economically well. This covers youth, this covers transgender men and women, this covers the women, this covers a myriad of people, and the information is rich. And I think that when you read the survey, and it's a long survey, and it's 70 pages of notes, but it's worth the read, and hopefully it'll help you and your individual work in creating change in your communities. One of our priorities, besides releasing this survey, is we have 3 priorities for 2021, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. It's really, we're stepping into the policy field. Traditionally, the Center for Black Equity did not do policy, and we're finding that our members are seeking policy information as they do policy in the local level. For example, our affiliate in Alabama has to join with other progressive organizations to fight 2 transgender bills in their legislatures, and they need to have information. And so we've hired a policy person who's helping them to craft the responses to transphobia, homophobia, and racism in the individual communities. The action is not just taking place in Washington, D.C., and I was so glad to hear NBJC's policy portfolio for this year. And many of those overlap with some of the things we're doing. We're pushing for increased data collection. We're pushing for immigration reform because we don't talk about that in our community a lot, but immigration is a Black issue as well. We have many people who are from Africa, from the Caribbean, and from even Canada, who are African Canadians, who are here in this country with different various forms of legality, and they need to be protected. And we need to make sure that we're not just including the ones that we hear about, that we're including all people of color, especially our African sisters and brothers of African diaspora. The other thing is youth homelessness. There's no reason why a young person should be homeless. And I think the Biden administration has a unique opportunity to support reforms that include ending youth homelessness. And we need to talk about it, we need to push it, and we need to be supportive of this issue. Pardon my big hand. And the other thing, the last thing I want to say that we're going to be doing is a Leadership Institute. We have 50 sets of leaders in our community who represent prides. And this is a constant door of changing, a revolving door of changing leadership. They need to have the skill sets. And in a very few weeks, we're going to be announcing an institute where we will be training leaders in our community to better equip themselves, not just to do a Black Pride, which is nice, but to have a voice in their community when important issues are being discussed, to have a voice when Black Lives Matter issues are being discussed, to have a voice when issues of not just traditional LGBT issues, but economic issues, housing, employment opportunities, transportation. We have Mayor Pete is now Secretary of Transportation Pete. What do we want for him? We want better transportation networks that impact our community, and not only just urban areas, but rural areas. There are many different issues that many of us can share, and not any one of us can do all things. And we have to spread the load out, but we have to have people who are informed, educated, and supported. And I'm going to stop talking. I've had my 5 minutes to say, but it's a great opportunity to be here, and I really appreciate you all. And I appreciate the spirit of collaboration that's taken over our community over the last few years. It really does my heart well. As I start to transition from leadership, I know that the people coming behind me are going to be dynamite and are doing a great job and going to continue the work that many of us have been doing for years. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. Thank you so much. That was very great and comprehensive. And I appreciated the shout out to state-based issues, which are really critical, important. You can also track, just so you all know, there's a state legislative tracker that the Equality Federation has, if you're interested in what anti-LGBTQ bills are happening in your state, as Earl was mentioning. It can really help you see what's been proposed and what's moving. I'm gonna pass it now to Bishop Tanya Ross, who is someone who I got to know very well over the last several years. Again, someone whose spirit just takes over the room when you meet her, with so much love and compassion and joy. And you'll see for yourself in a moment. She earned the bishop title, not just because of the credentialing, but for the way in which she shepherds people, both in policy work, but also spiritually. So I'm gonna pass it on to Bishop Tanya Rawls, the founding executive director of the Freedom Center for Social Justice.
Great. Hi. It is so good to see everybody. Folks, we did not have gray hair when we first started this work. Oh my God, right? Like remembering the prides in DC, my goodness. VKY and NBJC, I thank you all so much for this invitation. And I'm gonna dive right in. It's just so good to see so many people who we've been working with over the years. And I want to just sum up my remarks with one statement. Now's the time to go big and make bold moves. That's where we are right now, period. Now is the time for us to walk with power and collective strength in ways we may never have experienced or even seen before. In the past, we as Black folk in particular were led to believe that resources were scarce and that grassroots and treetop movements could not possibly be effective in working together due to really fundamental differences in not just the what of our efforts, but also the how, the where, the why, and the who. Who sets the agenda and who gets to lead are relevant questions when speaking of building legislative and social power. For more than 25 years, I have worked at the intersection of faith, race, sexual orientation, and gender identity and social justice. While this space is complex, it holds the keys to countless opportunities for culture shifts that have led to true systemic changes within organizations and institutions that have never experienced the power of working with those on the margins in society. In my remaining time, I want to just highlight several approaches to Freedom Center for Social Justice, which I had the honor of founding and am now executive director of. I wanted to talk about some specific things in these moments to share how intersectionality is going to be vital for any kind of key and sustained changes and shifts, not only in policy, but most importantly, within community. We start with trans visibility and equality. It became apparent to us early in 2000 that trans people, particularly trans people of color, were not only being excluded from many of our national conversations about LGBTQ equality, but we also recognized that much of this anti-trans and LGBT thought was rooted in teachings of the Christian church. As a Southern-based organization, we're based in Charlotte, North Carolina, we saw firsthand how policies and practices within and outside of our community led to isolation, high rates of suicide, substance abuse, high-risk behaviors, and exclusion from many of the tables where solutions to these challenges were being considered. In 2008, we hosted a summit in Los Angeles, California, with 20 trans people of color to identify needs within the community. Our theory was that if we centered our support for the most marginalized, that in turn would lift and benefit everyone. Our approach took into consideration the fact that in order to create viable solutions for any community, that community must be at the table, and they must be there in the beginning, in the formative stages, and not at the end or in the middle where they're asked to be a tag along to other agendas that are moved forward. The success we experienced with this approach to culture shift led to the establishment of our Trans Faith in Color conferences, which ran from 2010 to 2014. That evolved into our Transgender Faith in Action Network, which hosts an annual retreat in August for people of faith and allies committed to activism and care. From that, we then established the Transgender Seminarian Cohort, which is our national program done in partnership with the Task Force and the Pacific School of Religion. We don't all have to always compete. There are opportunities that present themselves where thinking collaboratively can actually lead to greater impact. And our three organizations chose to do that, and with great success. We are now about 7 cohorts in and have added faculty and an alumni network that helps ensure ongoing support and connection. This is a resource not only to the students who are in varied religious studies and seminary programs, but also is serving as a resource to those congregations and organizations that are open to hiring and supporting trans seminarians, trans scholars, and theologians. And so we're incredibly proud and excited of that work that is shifting culture the inside out. That work also in turn grew to include our soon to be officially launched Butterfly Collection. This is a collection that focuses on economic development for trans folk. And in particular, we were interested in supporting trans people of color. Our first cohort produced an amazing pre-launch collection of holiday cards that reflected the holidays through the eyes and experiences of trans people. The formal launch, y'all, is next week with our line of 7 original Valentine's Day cards. And when I say this line is bad, this line is bad. The cards will be available virtually for download and will also be distributed in Charlotte's LGBTQ bookstore, White Rabbit. Because of the great responses from the holiday collection, the artwork connected to it, we're also going to be offering this art via posters and prints. The designers not only get stipends, or those who participate in this program, but they also will be receiving a portion of all sales made. Then we had to focus on faith. There is no way around the fact that to establish true culture shifts within LGBTQ areas, whatever way that shows up, we had to engage with the church. Through our partnerships, we have been able to include faith leaders in all areas of our work. The goal was to deconstruct many of the false narratives that have been long held by allies and members of our own community. There are those who believe God is not pleased with LGBTQ folk because the Bible says we are abominations. Well, the question is, who told you that? Who told you that we were abominations? For in reality, there's only a handful of scriptures that even remotely connect to anything about us, and none of them are speaking to same gender loving experiences. In fact, understanding of that didn't even exist when the Bible writers were doing their work. To that end, what we have done is established Liberating Theologies, which is a program that allows us to bring some of the nation's top scholars and theologians together in the South in particular. And this year it will be virtual because of COVID. But one of the things that was important to us was to bring these other narratives in. And we have been so fortunate to have womanist theologians like Pamela Lightsey and Reverend Kwok Pwilan and Kelly Brown Douglas, being joined by activists like Robin Espinosa, who created trans theology. Some people don't even know that that exists, but there is a theology around transes now. And also hosting individual voices like Reverend Dr. William Barber, who started this journey with us, questioning whether or not and how to really step up and step out for LGBTQ people. And now in a place where, honest to goodness, he says LGBTQ more than I do because he gets more opportunities to say it. And these kind of shifts are so important. I want to close in just acknowledging a few of our big moves that we're in the process of making. And I'm wanting to acknowledge these publicly because in every one of these cases, we are very interested in partnering with many of you who are on this call today, both on the institutional level as well as individually. We have hired our first communications manager, who is a trans man of color, Tobias Dean. And that was one of our objectives. And we're so happy to now have him on our staff. We are publishing our first book. It is titled Shifting Tides, Stories and Images of Culture Shift in the South. And the goal there was for us to be able to share some of our learnings, particularly from the last 5 years, so that others might be able to replicate them in their areas. Everything we created so that they could be, it could be replicated in other segments and in other environments. That's going to be dropped actually next month, and it will be available electronically and also in printed versions, and you'll be seeing more information about that. As I stated earlier, we encourage you to check out our Valentine's collection. It will be available virtually, and so we'll be sending links out to that. And I'll ask I know a couple of our staff are on, if they could just drop the link in for how people can gain access to our website, that would be great. We also have established the first formal LGBTQ contingency with the NAACP's HK on J Moral Monday movement March. And so we encourage you all to join us, not only for that, but also for the pre-March summit, our first LGBTQ summit. At this summit, it is so important to understand who is being invited, and that is individuals that cross all different sectors. My last big announcement is we're in the process of formulating a new school, a school of theology and community called the Black Mountain School of Theology and Community. Black Mountain is located right outside of Asheville in a rural part of North Carolina. But the thing that's important to note is that the history of this school is centered in the Black Mountain School that was actually founded in 1933. And it was an environment that was created to find diverse ways of learning. We're going to be launching this school to build a bridge between those who are activists and those who are in the academy. And we're very much looking forward to that. I thank you for this opportunity to be with you. I look forward to us moving forward together and doing more incredible work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishop, and thank you to the Freedom Center for Social Justice. At this time, I'm thrilled to introduce another Floridian, Nadine Smith, who is the CEO and co-founder of Equality Florida, and a longtime leader, not only in the state of Florida, but nationally. Nadine has been someone who's been engaged in any of the major moments that has happened in LGBTQ history over the last 30 plus years. And I'm so thrilled that she's been able to join us today to share a little bit about Equality Florida, but knowing Nadine will also have a call to action for all of us and how we can do our work better and sharper.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And I'm going to pack a lot of information really fast because there's one piece that's so important to me to deliver. So I'm the executive director of Equality Florida and a founder not only of this organization, but the Equality Federation. I've really dedicated myself to building power at the state and local level because I understood early on that, gridlock in DC, things move slowly, but the influence that state legislatures have on our daily lives is something people don't fully grasp. And they can name federal elected officials, but can't name the leadership in their state legislature. They've been to Washington, DC for a march, but haven't been to their state capitol. And so really engaging our community around that has been really central to my activist life. The thing I want to talk about is that we are in this inflection point, this pivotal moment that, it's a perfect storm, but that doesn't mean it can blow us in the direction of progress or in the opposite direction right now. And I think it's so important that we understand that, the chickens are coming home to roost right now, that the questions are being called. And so when people say, oh, America's never been so divided, no, we've never been in more dialogue about the divisions that actually exist. And in some ways, we're in the midst of an asymmetrical war where they have declared war. They stormed the Capitol. They are killing people. And they're doing it under the cover of white innocence, and our reaction to being brutalized is immediately criminalized. And we really have to understand this moment and the danger. We didn't avoid a coup. That was just the first volley in this stage of a war. They haven't been deplatformed. They're still communicating. They're still collaborating and conspiring. And it's, when you look at January 6th and you see a guy with horns and you see, people wearing animal skins, and it's easy to turn these into caricatures. Somebody posted that basements in their mother's house are going to be open for rent once the FBI rounds all these guys up. But notice the language. When we call them militia instead of domestic terrorists, it becomes easier to decide, well, we're not going to pursue charges on all of them. That would be such a resource drain. when a young woman who steals Nancy Pelosi's computer and is actively trying to sell it to Russia gets released on her own recognizance to her mother. What everyone saw was how stark the difference was between the reaction to Black Lives Matter protests and the non-reaction. Doors being opened, selfies being taken, the invaders being allowed to simply walk out. You saw one, the police officer helping one of the traders walk down the stairs. Anyway, so we all saw that. The nation saw that, but how quickly it went from, we almost witnessed the live stream mass execution of Democratic leaders, the vice president and a handful of Republicans who've stood up to Trump, to treating it like it was a frat party gone wild. Everybody got a little out of hand. Let's not overreact. It's part of how whiteness is used to bestow innocence. And it's a very dangerous thing to have happen because we already know how emboldened these folks are. So let me get back to the main thing, what Victoria might call the ask. One of them is this: we have not maximized the power that we have. We have not maximized our power within a democracy, flawed as it might be. Not just the vote, but how we organize to protect the institutions, the structures of democracy has to be a priority, because so much of the work we do relies on changing hearts and minds, with the idea that changing hearts and minds changes how people vote, and changing how people vote changes who makes decisions. But there's so many places within that where our power gets siphoned away. Voter suppression comes in lots of different forms. The other thing that we're not doing is we're not exercising our economic clout. You know, the LGBT community collectively injects $1.7 trillion into the economy. We're not holding the kind of accountability, and pay attention to what's happening with GameStop. It sounds like a strange sort of arbitrary thing happening in the financial sector. And if you're not in the stock market, what do you care? But this is about individuals using social media to literally topple multi-billion-dollar hedge funds, which have been using basically a gaming system where I'm not going to break that all down, but it's going to be a change. This is a moment where collective economic action has just begun to flex its ability to break through these structures, these financial structures that have always closed us out. And we've got to pay attention to that. And the last two are cultural influence and moral authority. We dominate as Black people and as queer Black people specifically, and I would even say further that trans Black people are at the cutting edge right now. We know that it's, we talk about cultural appropriation and all of those things, but it's also true that we infuse everything. There's no part of entertainment, fashion, music, movies, comics, there's no part of it where we are not emerging in a way that is reshaping. There's again, I won't break it all down because I think y'all feel me anyway without me having to go into the details. But how we use and organize that cultural influence, how we actively maneuver it. I was on a Zoom like 2 days ago, and it was ostensibly about allyship, but really what it devolved into, this is my commercial. I'm so tired of talking about white allyship. I'm so tired of being in spaces where there's an endless critique of how white people show up, don't show up in ways that are fake. They came for I don't care. It centers whiteness again. The only thing that matters is how we leverage what happens. So if a corporation says Black Lives Matter, I don't want to spend time dissecting whether they had a platform before that, whether this was just for show. What I want to know is, what do we do now that they've tried to enter that space? How do we leverage the fact that they're in there? And we have the economic clout to do it. We have the cultural influence to do it. And we have the moral authority to do it. So the moral authority is the final piece that I just want to put out there. Because what we're grappling with in America right now is cyclical. It is reconstruction. It is the backlash to our increased visibility and increased power. And it is the fear of white people in a increasingly multiracial, multicultural, diverse, inclusive America. And even if they do not think it that way or form it fully in their minds, the reason that Trumpism and all of its predecessors resonate is that they have this overwhelming feeling that something is slipping away and that any gain for anybody else is a theft from them. And so their anger, their rage is genuine, even if it is delusional, misplaced, and fear-based, right? It's honest. And we have to understand how much of that, how dangerous a moment it is for us, and why we have to confront it. And so the part of the reason that we must insist on accountability for the people that launched the attack on the Capitol is because the only thing that will dissipate, the only thing that will stop that from growing in momentum, and I encourage people to read about the Battle for Hope Place and North Carolina's history, where as Black people came into power and won elected office and built financial power, how the white populace reacts and the bloodshed that follows. And even after it's over, the fear that settles into communities that have experienced that violence without redress, how long lasting it is. So the thing that I want to urge people around is to understand how dangerous this moment we are in is, and two, to understand the power we actually have. Let's not worry about what white people are doing. Let's ask ourselves, what are we doing? How are we harnessing our political power? How are we harnessing our economic clout? How are we using our vast cultural influence? And how are we using our moral authority to continue to center the conversation that we must have? And that conversation boils down to this. We will either have an America that is multiracial, multicultural, inclusive, and respects the dignity of all people, or we will have chaos, strife, and violence. These are the only choices available to us right now. And we cannot be lulled by one election into believing that we have vanquished. As terrible as the Trump years were, in some ways, this is a moment where they are crystallizing and forming the next wave. And we can't have our defenses down. We have to be alert and ready to respond. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you again, Victoria, for inviting me into the platform.
Thank you, Nadine. So many jewels. You'll see in the chat some of the reflections folks have had. You had me stuck for a moment because my brain started going back to 2009 and the Tea Party and thinking about how we were so focused on the presidency that we let our guard down when it came to state legislatures and redistricting and ensuring that we won during the midterms in 2010. And if we thought the Tea Party was something and what they tried to organize, these Trumpers gonna really be trying to do something. So it's critical that, to what Nadine said, we're prepared to do the work, to make sure that our side is ready, but also, and ready to win, to be clear, in the midterms, but also that some of you out there are thinking about running for office. People often say they don't get engaged because they don't feel inspired, or they need you to run. So if you're interested, you'll hear me shout out different partners throughout this event. Victory Institute has some solid training, Collective PAC has some solid training, and we're looking at ways to be able to provide space for our community as well in partnership with others. So again, stay tuned to nbjc.org for more information there. I'm gonna pass it to our next speaker. We got two left. I know we're running over. We're very verbose and we're also behind. But I have a hard time stopping people I respect so deeply when they're dropping things that I think need to be said, and if not at the Black Institute, where? So at this time, I'm going to introduce my sister, Reverend Naomi Washington Leaphart, someone who every time we talk, I feel like not only am I ministered to, but I'm poured into as a human, as a person, and not just as a person leading and doing policy work in different spaces. Naomi has a gift in being able to raise not only what's moving out in the world, but to lift up a prophetic voice about what's possible in our future. And I wanted to make sure that she had a platform to talk to you all, because I know just from knowing her that she's got some words that will not only inspire, but encourage, and also a call to action that'll ensure that we're all ready, that we have our tools. So Naomi, I'm passing it over to you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Hey, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. And so I'm saying hello to many of my friends, folks who are my comrades, who have been on the front lines with me and in boardrooms behind closed doors with me, trying to make sure that this nation lives up to the myths that she promotes. So thank you so much for this invitation. I want to just talk about two things. First of all, I work in Philadelphia city government. For many years, I was working in faith advocacy within LGBTQ movement spaces. And now I've transitioned to a role within city government. And so the first call to action that I would offer to our community is that we must advocate within our local municipalities for funded and official offices of LGBTQ plus affairs. We need to know that at the local level, there are hired people who get a salary and whose full-time job it is to make sure that LGBTQ plus people in our cities are cared for, are fought for. And Philadelphia is one of the cities, one of the few cities, sadly, in our country that has an Office of LGBT Affairs. And in this work, I'm not the director of that office, but I was on the commission that advised the office. And we have been able to do some extraordinary things, including testifying before city council, including convening community grief spaces when one of our family members is stolen from us, including coalition building with other organizations and other departments within city government, so that they are informed by our work and we are informed by theirs. It's a strategic gift for us to have someone we can go to in our city whose job it is to make sure that we can live, and not only live, but thrive. And so this needs to be a fully funded position, hopefully written into the charter or the constitution or whatever the grounding documents of the municipality are. And then that those staff need to have an analysis, right? Need to be grounded by a politics of liberation, need to be connected deeply to the communities that office would advocate on behalf of. So I would just say that it's a shame in 2021, that more cities in the United States do not have an Office of LGBT Affairs that is funded, that is supported, that is affirmed by everybody in City Hall. And so form a team of folks to investigate why in your city, if you don't have one, you don't have one, right? So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing I want to say is, with my hat on as a faith leader, my role with city government is actually the director of faith-based and interfaith affairs. And I say that with a kind of smirk because everybody didn't want me to get this job, y'all. Not because I believe what I believe, or not because, but because I don't represent for them a person of faith. How can I? I'm married to a woman. How can I? I spent several years on Capitol Hill advocating for the rights of LGBTQ plus community. The narrative has been for so long, and Bishop Rawls said it earlier, that certain folk corner the market on faith and spirituality, that faith doesn't belong to us, that spirituality doesn't belong to us. But I'm here to say that we cannot surrender faith and faithfulness to the people who believe that we are abominations, to the people who will march on the Capitol with signs that say, you know, Trump is my president and Jesus is my savior, or God and guns, or whatever they might say, right? That we don't surrender that, because we are deeply faithful. We are deeply spiritual. In fact, we have remained faithful when faith communities have betrayed us, right? When they shut their doors on us, when they asked us to come, but don't tell, right? When they themselves were hypocritically flirting and in our DMs, right? I mean, I know what I'm talking about, right? So we cannot surrender faith to those who believe that we are abominations. And so that means we have to weigh in to conversations about faithfulness, right? We got to weigh in when they're talking about religious freedom. We got to weigh in when, you know, arguments are made about whether or not there should be a more robust separation of church and state. We have to weigh in. We have to write op-eds, right? We have to ask, why isn't there a queer person on this panel here about faith and so? You know, Pastor, why haven't you ever had an out person preach a sermon here? Right? I'm talking about making the personal political. We know the personal is political, right? So personal faith has to also be politicized. So if you are a person of faith and spirituality, I invite you to consider the ways you can interrupt this narrative, right? That queerness and faithfulness cannot coexist. The project of white supremacy, as has been said already, had to first be theologically justified. I will say that until the day I leave this earth. It had to first be sanctioned according to the divine. That's the reason it's lasted for centuries, because somebody made it sacred to diminish the humanity of folk. Somebody said that that was God's plan and God's will. And we ought to say otherwise. We ought to refuse to stay in abusive relationships with faith communities that will exploit us, but not actually take us seriously. That's a personal move, right? That has political ramifications. We have to refuse to be spiritually gaslit. You're not gonna sprinkle some God on it and make it okay, right? We have to interrogate our own theologies. That's why I love what Bishop Rawls and others are doing over at the Freedom Center with this Liberating Theologies conference, right? To say that we can construct a new way of thinking about the divine, right? That is legitimate, that is wise, that is holy, right? We are not peripheral, and we can't stand to be peripheral in faith communities anymore. And so I would just encourage you to make the personal decision to refuse to concede your spirit and your faithfulness to the crazies. And let me not say crazies, because I don't mean to use that ableist kind of language. We can't concede it to the folk who will use their power to kill us. Bottom line. And so those are the two things I would say. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm grateful to be part of this community and part of this movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See, I told y'all every time I'm in her presence. I used to get to spend every day with her. Now I can't, man. Whew, that was a blessing. I know it was a blessing to you all as well. I'm still sitting with the we ain't periphery. We aren't peripheral. My words are going together. Y'all heard it. That's a big takeaway, because often we talk about being marginalized, it means over there, but marginalized doesn't mean that we don't have the ability. It just means people are negating the ability because of their own discrimination and prejudice and bias. We don't have to be pushed to the margins, and we don't have to be made to feel or be peripheral. Anyway, there's a whole sermon in there somewhere. I'm going to pass it to our very last speaker. Ash, hold on, give me 1 second, my little slide thing. Passing it to our final speaker for this section, Ash Lee Henderson of the Movement for Black Lives. As you all know, the organization that holds so much of the various affiliates that do Black Lives Matter work, and has really been pushing for a bold agenda for all Black people. We are excited to be in partnership with N4BL and to have Ashley on with us today. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Ashley to be able to share words on behalf of the Movement for Black Lives.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and shout out to NBJC. We love you over at the Movement for Black Lives. My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. I use she, her pronouns, or anything said respectfully in right relationship. My day job is that I'm the first Black woman executive director of a place called the Highlander Research and Education Center in Tennessee. And I am a proud member, proud member of the Movement for Black Lives, and many of you on the line today. Y'all know I'm a missionary Baptist preacher's daughter. And so when I say hello, I'm used to people talking back to me. So if you're in the chat and you're hearing me, just say what's up. So I know I'm in the right place. When you go last, the challenge is that everybody said they good sermons and it just makes you want to preach more, but I'm gonna try to keep it tight. But before I get into the very nitty gritty of what N4BL is up to, I just want us not to miss the obvious of some of the things that we just heard. I want to make obvious to you what the blessing was of what we just saw and heard. I want you to see Nadine and the good bishop, and how they literally just showed you in practice that as goes the South, so goes the nation is not an opinion, it is a fundamental fact. I want you to see how they just illustrated to us that the South is the largest geographic region in the United States that is also the Blackest and the home of the most LGBTQ plus folks in the country, right? That this is our time, right? That's what they just told you. And if that wouldn't have preached enough that we are the biggest, Blackest, boldest, queerest region in the country that is making waves and has been at the forefront of every good social thing that's happened in this country, we don't concede, is what Naomi just said. So what I know then is that I come and you come, I believe, from a tradition of people like Mama Nair Watkins would say, that say we have everything we need in our bones. And that from my religious tradition say, victory is mine, victory is mine, victory today is mine. How could we help but not be glad today, good people? Because although it is true, what Nadine said is true, we live in dangerous times. We are at a critical precipice of the next long arc of what this country will be, right? I don't want to diminish that. Y'all that know me know, Nazis burned down my office before it was an election year. We've been facing down white supremacist patriarchal violence, right? We know more than most as queer people, Black people, queer people, working class people on this call, right? But what is also real is that we are not in those dire straits because we are just losing and white power structures are just building. Neoliberal infrastructure is just building. What's happening is that they're responding to us, right? We have now built the largest social movement in US history on the legacy of our ancestors and elders, and they are scared, beloveds. So I bring you good tidings of great joy that the doors of the Movement for Black Lives are wide open for you. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about why I hope you decide you wanna make a home with us. So I'm gonna talk about some of the values and stuff, and then I'm gonna land it with some of the concrete things that we're doing. I also wanna shout out to the ASL interpretation team because y'all are the real MVPs on this. the first thing that I want to say that I think are lessons of the movement for Black Lives is that we're not getting caught up in false dichotomies, right? We're not getting caught up in the idea that the demand for defunding the police is somehow divisive, or that if LGBTQI plus folks are in the leadership of our movements, that we're leaving other Black people behind, because we know that's not true. So we're going to build the movement that we said we agreed to, that believes that all Black lives matter. When I say all Black lives, I mean Black trans folks, I mean Black queer folks, I mean Black disabled folks, I mean poor Black folks. I'm talking about all of us, right? And I also want to push back, the movement for Black Lives pushes back against the idea that we can only do one thing at a time. Our movement, our communities are bad and bold enough to be able to do multiple things at the same time, right? We are not going to go from protest to policy, or from policy to organizing. We're going to do it all, right? So we have a table that has developed some of the most transformative policy demands in the country, right? We have an organizing and base building table. Y'all know 20% of our budget goes to the field on top of the money that we give to grassroots base building organizations for programming. Come get it. Come get it, right? We have a strategy table, right? We've got a table that's brand new around ending patriarchal violence, and not just talking about the theory and the values of it, but making commitments to how much we want to see patriarchal violence stop in our lifetime, right? The doing of the work, right? Right? This is our demand, right? We're gonna walk and chew gum at the same time. The second thing that I would tell you is that we will not be neutral, beloveds. What we've seen is that those who give centrist demands, I'm gonna go back to what Bishop Rawls said, we gotta be bold, y'all. If we don't say what our people deserve, then we will get the crumbs from the master's table, right? And that won't be enough to sustain our people, right? So we are gonna demand what we deserve. Do you know how liberating it is to be able to say, this is my vision, this is my values, this is what we want, period? No compromise, no concessions. We will not be neutral. Because what we know is you can't be neutral on a moving train. You are either bending the moral arc of the universe towards justice, or you are assisting in it being held back, one or the other. So I would ask you, beloveds, which side are you on? Come be on this movement side with us. And then the last thing I would say in terms of just like analysis is that every good thing, every even minimally good thing that we've seen in the last few months has been because we have built a Black-led, multiracial, working-class rooted queer AF movement, a movement of movements, a united and a popular front, right? That says that we are the only hope that the vestiges of the myth of democracy could come to fruition in our lifetime. So I just want to say, for 45 not being in office, movement did that. For the Senate being flipped, that was y'all too. Right? For these executive orders that people are telling us that we ought to celebrate that are only the floor, not the ceiling. Guess what? Biden didn't do that just because he's a good guy. He did that because you made him, right? The Senate, the House, these new elected officials that are so progressive. Guess what? They're progressive because you made them be. Guess what? The bills that they will put into office are the bills that they will see come into law. Those things are only possible because you put on political pressure that made it possible. So I want to tell you that the movement for Black Lives is not backing down. This is not a time to rest on our laurels or pat ourselves on the back. We have more work to do, good people. So I'm going to tell you now what that stuff is, right? We understand that we are in the midst of the first 100 days. We understand that we voted for conditions and targets, not saviors. And so there's an agenda that must be won, right? And how do we do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. We wrote a thing called the Black Power Rising Plan, and it's a 5-year strategy of the movement for Black Lives. What we're going to do is build local power all across this country, particularly where Black and queer folks are, where LGBTQI plus folks are across our spectrum, right? We're going to actually talk to 4 million Black people. We're committed to doing that in 5 years. We're putting numbers to these goals, y'all. We're not talking apple pie in the sky. We're making metrics about what we want to see accomplished in our leadership, right? We're going to talk to 4 million Black people. We're going to engage in mass engagement. We're going to support and resource local organizing and base building work and building local independent Black political power. We, are going to do leadership development and political education with our folks, because we might meet them where they're at, which might not be in alignment with all of our goals and values, but we will not leave them where we found them, right? This is our work. We will fight for electoral justice, right? That is going to be our work, because what we know is just getting Trump out does not mean Trumpism goes away, right? What we know for sure is that also many of us live in places where neoliberal Democrats have been killing us slowly with policy just as much as we were impacted by the Trump administration, right? So we're gonna make sure that we built the people power to be able to get what we deserve and are organized to take. That's our work. So get to the nitty gritty about how it impacts LGBTQI plus folks, Ashley. Again, I'm glad you asked. So I'm gonna drop some stuff in the chat. I told you we believe in political education. We believe in giving up the mic and making sure that everybody that is directly impacted by the demands that we're making can speak for themselves. One of the ways that we did that is through just having like regular webinars and national calls where people can hear from experts in the field. So the first link I'm going to drop is to an event that we held back in August that was about ending the war on Black trans people. So some of you all know that we wrote a document called the Vision for Black Lives. And the Vision for Black Lives was really just a synthesis of demands that folks like you have been making on the ground for generations. We just put it into one big policy doc. In that policy doc, we asked for an ending to the war against Black people back in 2016. And then we realized that we needed to get even more specific about some of the Black people who were disproportionately impacted by that war on our communities. So we wrote a specific section on ending the war on Black trans people. This link that I dropped, actually, one of the guest stars of that was the Ash Stevens. So thank you for being out there. You'll also hear the voices of my best friend, M. Adams, from the executive director of Freedom, Inc. You'll hear from Tony Michelle Williams, the incredible director of Solutions Not Punishment down in Atlanta, Georgia. You'll hear from our OG, Janetta Johnson, the executive director of TGI Justice Project out on the West Coast. You'll hear from Ola from Black LGBTQ plus Migrant Project. And you'll hear from Sean from Intersex Justice Project. So check it out, share it around, spread the word. What we know is that in light of the intersecting crises that our communities are facing, this epidemic of violence against Black trans women, the Trump administration's intensified anti-trans policies, and just ableism, gender-based violence, homophobic and transphobic violence, that we've got to do something to really be intentional if we want to see the conditions of our people shift. So that political education is just one step on that path. The second link I'm going to drop down in the chat is the section of the 2.0 version of the Vision for Black Lives that is specific to ending the war on Black, trans, queer, gender nonconforming, and intersex people. So check it out. There's like write-up of the issues that we're seeing, right? There's the demands that communities and organizations are making. There's action steps that folks can take towards seeing our vision come to fruition. And then there's key federal legislation that organizations that have been doing this work have been amplifying, like the Equality Act, the End Racial and Religious Profiling Act, the Safe Sex Worker Study Act, and the Therapeutic Fraud Prevention Act, and more. So check it out, and again, spread the word. And then last, but certainly not least, has anybody heard of the Breathe Act? We wrote a federal bill, y'all. And I say that as a person who has had a long legacy of being like, policy stuff is for the birds, man. That's some reformist shit. But I've learned that actually when grassroots communities come to the table and we write it ourselves, that it can be transformative, y'all. So guess what? You heard my colleague Naomi say, we're not going to concede. Well, we didn't concede when people told us that all that needed to happen on the federal level was increased funding to policing, more training, some body cams, and the blah, blah, blah. We've seen that. We've seen the platinum band-aids, and we know that doesn't work, right? So when we wrote the Breathe Act, we essentially said that what we said when we were stumping the pavement all summer in the largest social movement of US history, when 26 million of us were screaming to the rafters, defund the police, that's exactly what we meant, right? So then we wrote a federal omnibus bill, which essentially means everything in the kitchen sink bill, that's called the Breathe Act, right? That essentially will do 4 things. It'll divest federal resources from incarceration and policing. It will then invest those dollars into new, non-punitive, non-carceral approaches to community safety that lead states to shrink their criminal legal systems and center the protection of Black lives, including Black mothers, Black trans people, and Black women, right? Because we know we're disproportionately impacted by the criminal legal system, right? It will allocate new resources, new money to build healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities all across this country. And it will call us to have actual administrative action to hold political leaders to their promises as champions of our work and enhance self-determination of all Black communities. I'm gonna drop the link to the BREATHE Act down in the chat. If you wanna see the full bill, I'm gonna drop that also in the chat. And you can read for yourself all of the different areas in which LGBTQI+ folks are specifically named. It's folks deserving of equitable education, free, right? That our folks deserve reparations, particularly those of us that have been incarcerated unjustly, right? Which is all of us, right? So read the bill, see where we are. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, holler at us. Again, the movement for Black Lives is only as strong as our membership, and that's each and every one of you. So come get down with us. Again, I love you. I'm grateful for this sacred space that we're building together. And I'm excited about winning and seeing all of you at the finish line there too. Peace.